The first industrial revolution caused the growth of industries such as coal, iron, railroads, and textiles. But the second industrial revolution of 1870 caused the expansion of electricity, petroleum, and steel. Basically, during this revolution, old products were replaced with new ones. For example, steel began to replace iron, and telegraphs were replaced with telephones. Steel was being used for construction products, industrial machines, railroads, and ships. Steel production made it possible for rail lines to be built at a competitive cost, which spread transportation further. The use of electricity changed the way people worked and lived. In the 1870s, the first official commercial electrical generators were used. Then, in 1881, Great Britain was the first to install a public power station. In 1810, it was possible to power a residency from one single station. As you can see, the use of electricity changed society. The second industrial revolution can also be referred to as the technological revolution, because it was a phase of new innovations in technology. The second industrial revolution led to many inventions, such as Alexander Graham Bell's telephone in 1876. Thomas Edison and Joseph Swan perfected the design of the light bulb in 1879. In 1856, synthetic dye was discovered by English chemist William Henry Perkin. His discovery was accidental, and he scaled up production and commercialized it as the world's first synthetic dye. During this time, industries dominated in steel, oil, sugar, and the manufacturing of agricultural machinery. Increased mechanization of industry increased the productivity of factories. The period from 1870 to 1890 saw the greatest increase in economic growth. During this time, the German Empire became a rival to Britain as Europe's primary industrial nation. Since Germany industrialized later, it was able to model its factories after Britain's, making it more efficient of its capital. British production fell behind Germany's, and they simply did not work as hard as their rivals. Germany's industry began to exceed Britain's. Germany invested more heavily than the British, especially in motors, chemistry, and electricity. Being significantly more focused, Germany was not weighed down. By the 1900s, German chemical industries dominated in the world market for synthetic dyes.
At the time of the Second Industrial Revolution, there were huge advancements in transportation and communication. Much of these improvements greatly affected trade, migrations, and global interactions. To start off, these advancements in transportation included construction of railroads and steamships powered by steam engines. These new means of transportation aided in faster trade within a country when using a railroad and overseas with a steamship. Railroads and steamships in turn allowed for a quicker way of migration as well as increased global interactions. People no longer had to live near farms because railroads could transfer goods quickly to them. This allowed for many of those people to migrate to cities, which increased the urban populations dramatically. Furthermore, these improvements also allowed for increased global interaction and communication. The railroads and steamships helped people move around faster, so there was an exponential growth in interactions worldwide. In addition, telegraph cables changed the way the world communicated. People were able to communicate with each other in a matter of minutes rather than days by a ship. At this time, industries were flourishing rapidly. There were an immense amount of benefits from industrialization. However, there was a drastic increase in hazards brought on by industry growth. Dangers caused by this included pollution, overcrowding, poor working conditions, and child labor. First off, factories were the leading cause of air pollution at the time. The smoke released toxins into the air, which was hazardous to the health of humans who lived near the factories. Secondly, with the huge increase in urban populations, many cities became overcrowded. Overcrowding of cities led to an increased spread of illnesses like smallpox, cholera, and tuberculosis, which added on to the health hazards. To continue, poor working conditions affected the lives of many factory workers. Workers worked 12 hours or longer in hot factories with dangerous machines and with minimal or no break at all. Workers were exposed to moving parts of the machines, and the parts moved so fast that the fingers and arms and legs of these workers potentially could get caught. This is especially dangerous for child laborers whose body was smaller and could fit into those parts. Before the Industrial Revolution, women had traditional jobs like making clothes or taking care of the house. But when the Industrial Revolution began, women took up factory jobs mass-producing goods. Women entered the workforce in order to help provide for the family additionally. Women were seen as less valuable in the workplace than men and were paid significantly less than men as well. Much of this drove women to want equal rights in all aspects. Furthermore, industrialization greatly impacted public education. At this time, governments passed laws stating that children were provided 2 hours of education if working in factories. This allowed child laborers to still have education while working. Lastly, labor movements increased during this time period out of need to protect workers. Labor unions of industrial areas imposed low wages, long hours, and poor working conditions and fought to better these. They also tried to stop child labor, provide health benefits, and incorporate workers' aid. Many of them were able to achieve these goals later on.
Many believe industrialization actually led to imperialism. Industrialization has made it more possible for European countries to conquer other countries, as well as it gave European countries more of a motivation to go out and conquer. The availability of cheap sources of raw materials, desire for new markets in which to sell manufactured goods, and the need to protect these acquisitions all forced into late 19th century imperialism. Capitalism and socialism are somewhat opposing views in economics and society. The arguments centralize around economic equality and the role of government. Capitalism is a market-driven economy where the state does not interfere in the economy. Socialism, on the other hand, is characterized by state ownership of businesses and services. In capitalism, it leaves the market force up to sharpening the society and life. Socialists tend to believe economic inequality is bad for the society, and that the government is responsible for reducing it via programs that benefit the poor, like free education, free or subsidized healthcare, social security for the elderly, and or higher taxes on the rich. Socialism tends to provide greater social welfare and decreases business fluctuations, whereas capitalism allows for economic freedom and growth. In capitalism, your social class is based on one's relationship to the capital, but in socialism, classes and social structure is completely diminished. This picture here is a picture of the first telegraph message that was printed by Samuel Morse on May 24th in 1844. When decoded, this paper tape recording of this historic message, written by Samuel F. B. Morse, reads, "What hath God wrought?" Morse later sent it from the Supreme Court's room in the U.S. Capitol in Washington to his assistant, Alfred Vail, in Baltimore. Morse's first early system produced a paper copy with raised dots and dashes, which were later translated by an operator. Across the top of this artifact, Morse has given credit to Annie Ellsworth, the younger daughter of a good friend. Annie says she found this quote in the Bible in Numbers 23:23.
With the creation of a wide range of kinds of transportation, it made everything unbelievably progressively available to the world, which hence led to such a significant number of other advantageous items and thoughts. Without this insurgency, the world would be stuck in light of the fact that we would be kept inside our very own land without methods for acquiring and selling items. The Second Industrial Revolution had increased migrations and settler work that turned into a central point in the majority of the dynamic developments. The whole Second Industrial Revolution was a period of development for the United States, since they ceaselessly adapted lots of new things all through this time span. This was the necessary leap forward that everyone took, which is why we are where we are today.